You're listening to Adoptees On, the podcast where adoptees discuss the adoption experience. This is Season 2, Episode 9, Rebekah. I'm your host, Haley Radke. Rebekah Henson shares her story with us of growing up as an only child, then discovering she was one of 7 biological siblings. If this sounds at all familiar, I actually interviewed Rebekah's older sister, Mariana King, on Season 1, Episode 7. Rebekah is incredibly open with me about the challenges of such a complex reunion. We also dish on all the awkward and completely inappropriate things people have said to us about being adopted. As always, we wrap up with some recommended resources, and links to all of the things we'll be talking about today are on the website adopteeson.com. Let's listen in. I'm so pleased to welcome Rebekah Henson to Adoptees On. Thank you so much for joining us, Rebekah.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk. I was trying to say talk and chat at the same time.
Well, I'm excited to chat and talk with you also. I would love it if you would just start by telling us a little bit about your adoption story.
I was adopted as an infant. Neither of my parents were able to have kids, and they actually tried going through an adoption agency. It was actually their second marriage for both of them. And they were, I think, in their early to mid 30s when they first started pursuing adoption. And this was in like the early to mid 1980s. And the adoption agency they were trying to work with told them they were too old at the age of like 35 to try to adopt. So they really wanted to have kids. That was like both of their life dreams. My mom came from a really huge Irish Catholic family. She's the youngest of 8. My dad had a really small family, but he always loved kids and I think kind of imagined himself having a bigger family. So they were trying to look for other avenues, and they kind of like talked to everyone they knew, and they were at a church meeting. It was a prayer meeting at their church, and they were asking for prayer for, kind of this adoption journey they were trying to go on. And one of the people at that meeting actually knew my birth mother and ended up connecting them. She was my biological mother's foster mother, who actually facilitated the connection between my biological mother and my adoptive parents. My mother originally wanted to keep me. She actually didn't make the decision to place me with my adoptive parents until I think about like an hour or so after I was born. And my parents got this surprise phone call. I was born on a Tuesday, and Easter was early that year. It was in March that year. So I was born the Tuesday before Easter, and my parents got this surprise phone call from my biological mother's foster mother, asking if they wanted a baby like right now, because they had one who needed a home. So that was when my biological mother made the decision to place me, and my parents kind of like took a minute and thought about it and said, yeah, we really it felt like it was the answer to their prayers. And they brought me home from the hospital the next day, and my adoption was finalized, I think, the following January. So I grew up as an only child, but I'm also one of 6 siblings who were all separated through different private adoptions, which is always kind of complicated to try to tell people who I'm meeting for the first time, like coworkers, things like that. I'm talking about how, like, the question always comes up, like when you're making small talk, oh, how many siblings do you have? Do you have any siblings? And I always kind of start off by saying that, oh yeah, I'm an only child, whatever. And then I'll be telling a story and one of my sisters is involved and I mention a sister and then I stop and say, oh, wait, I have to go back and explain myself. So that's always a little hairy.
So that's so funny because that's how I identify too. I say I grew up an only child and now I'm a big sister because I have 3 younger siblings after a reunion. So did you have a reunion? Were you in contact with her at all through your childhood, or what's the story there?
No, it was a closed adoption. This was in the mid 1980s, so open adoption wasn't really a thing just yet. So it was kind of closed by default because that's just how it was done. But I always knew that I was adopted. My mom wanted to make sure that I always knew my own history and my own story, and that I could be confident in it and just kind of take ownership of that. And she never wanted to lie to me, and she took it to extremes, in fact, to the point where she wouldn't let me believe in Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny either, because she couldn't bring herself to tell me like any kind of lie at all, and she considered Santa and the Easter Bunny to be a lie, and she didn't want to shake my faith or shake my trust in her. So I was like 4 years old and like telling all my aunts and uncles that Santa wasn't real, and they were horrified.
Oh my gosh. I'm just like, this is what I have done to my children.
Yeah.
My son Isaiah, he's the one telling all his little friends that Santa is pretend. Oh
no.
Okay. That's so interesting. Okay, sorry, go on. I'm just like, whoa.
No, so she was just really committed to always being very open and honest with me about my adoption story. And she didn't know a whole lot about my biological family. She did know that I had a brother and 3 older sisters. I think she met Mary, my oldest sister, when what were they doing? She went over to my biological mother's house before the adoption was finalized. I think that was when she gave her the pictures. My biological mother wanted to make sure that I had pictures of my older siblings and her and my biological father, so that when I had questions as I was growing up, my parents would have those photos and would be able to give them to me, share them with me, so I would know, kind of who I looked like and whose nose I had and whose eye color I had. So she gave my mom one of their wedding photos, and then she had baby pictures of my 4 oldest siblings that she gave her copies of those, so that I would always have them. So so when she went over there, I think that's what she was going over there for. They lived like 10 minutes away from each other, so they were really close to each other. So she was going over there, I think, to pick up the photos, and Mary was there, and that was the first time that she met my adoptive mom. And a couple weeks later, she was at church, and she saw me from across the pew. And after the service was over, she actually approached my adoptive mom and asked if she could hold her little sister. And that was just a little too much for my mom, and they never went back to that church again. So she felt a little threatened, I think, by the idea of my biological family. She always kind of had this fear that they would come back for me. And in fact, her sisters actually tried to convince her against adopting me, because this was around the same time that the baby M case was a big deal.
I don't think I know what that is. Can you tell us?
So baby M, that was a couple had hired a surrogate to have a baby for them, and after the surrogate gave birth, she decided she wanted to keep the kid. And there was a huge, crazy custody battle that lasted for, I think, like a year or two before the couple who hired the surrogate finally was able to get custody. But it was like this crazy legal battle where the surrogate changed her mind. So it wasn't totally an adoption case, but it was really high profile in the news at the time. And it was like a couple months before my adoption was finalized, and everyone was telling my mom, don't go through with it because the family is going to want to take her back at some point, and you have to be prepared for that. So she always kind of had that in the back of her mind. So there was always this kind of pull, like whenever I had questions about where I came from, what my family was like, she would give me the information that she knew, but like she would kind of twist things a little bit to be like, oh yeah, like you have the same hair color as your mom, but her hair was always really greasy. Like she would always try to take like little digs at my biological family in little subtle ways. So that was kind of a weird thing that we had. But so I knew that I had siblings out there, and I knew that I would meet them eventually. And my mom actually supported the idea of search and reunion, but she would always try to dissuade me in little ways. So that's that little back and forth again too. That was always kind of present in my story and my relationship with my mom especially. So we didn't meet until I was in college, although I did start searching when I think I was about 16. My parents had actually found a copy of my original birth certificate. I think my biological mother had given them the copy of it along with the photos. Well, I guess to back up a little bit, I found out when I was in first grade that I had siblings. So I always knew that I was adopted. I knew that I had other parents out there, like another family out there that I would meet eventually. And then when I was in first grade, I was the only kid in my class who didn't have any siblings. And we were learning vocabulary words one afternoon that had to do with family relationships. So, like, we were learning how to spell like mother, father, sister, brother, etc. And the teacher, my first grade teacher, asked all the kids to raise your hand if you have a brother or a sister at home. And everyone in the class raised their hand except for me. And she went on this like bizarre rant about how we should feel really sad for kids who don't have brothers or sisters at home because they must be so lonely, and they'll never have anyone to rely on in life, and it's just really so sad when you don't have any brothers or sisters. So we should like really pity these kids who don't have brothers or sisters at home. And as the only one who didn't raise my hand, I took that pretty personally, and I came home from school crying, and my mom asked me what was wrong. And I told her what my teacher said, and she had some really choice words for that teacher. And she sat me down, and she started telling me, that you're adopted, and that kind of means that you have another family out there who you'll meet eventually when you decide to. But you also, in addition to having a second set of parents out there, you have siblings. You don't know them right now, and I don't know when you'll get a chance to meet them. You'll meet them when the time is right. You're an only child right now, but you won't be an only child forever. I kind of knew that. I always knew that they were out there from that day. I would write them. I would actually write them letters in my journal. And my mom found their pictures when I think I was 12. She wasn't able to find the pictures that day when she told me that story. She uncovered them one day when I was about 12 years old, and I carried them with me everywhere I went. And I felt like they were really a part of me. Like even though we didn't know each other yet, I felt I felt like they were always like kind of like these shadows on my heart that were just always a part of me. And I wondered about them a lot. I would have like pretend conversations with them. Like when I was like falling asleep at night, I would pretend like we were sharing a room or something. I had a very vivid imagination life. Yeah, when I was about 16, my parents were going through an old trunk that they kept important documents in, and that's when they found the copy of my original birth certificate that actually had my original name on it. My biological mother named me before she placed me, and I'm actually the only one that who was adopted outside of our family, because some of my siblings were adopted by our biological grandfather, and then the rest of us had private adoptions to strangers, people who weren't related to the family. So out of those adoptions, we were all placed as, the rest of us were all placed as infants pretty much immediately. So out of those adoptions, I was the only one that she had named, because she had originally intended to keep me, but ultimately she didn't have the support that she needed to be able to raise me, which always makes me kind of sad. In addition to my to my birth name that was on there, which made me feel a little weird seeing that. It made me feel like I don't know, like there was like a second me out there that just could have been, but wasn't. It was, I don't know, like just the sense of like who I would have been if I hadn't been adopted. It was like the second me that kind of haunted me from that day forward. And it had my biological mother's name listed as the mother, and then my biological father's name listed as the father, because they were married as well. And that kind of got my wheels turning. Like I was always really curious about my family, and kind of like what their personalities were like. Like did they think like me? Did they believe things like me? Because I kind of felt like I never really totally fit in with my adoptive parents. Like I love them, but I'm the complete opposite of them in every single way. So I always kind of wondered, like would I fit in with them? Would are there other people out there who think like me, share my personality, that kind of thing. And then especially at the age of 16, seeing all of those names on like this document that was part of me, just got me really, really curious. And I actually Googled my biological father's name, and I think there were about 4 different phone numbers that came up for him. So I kind of stopped my search there. Because I was underage in the state where I was born anyway. I don't know if this varies by state or if it's a federal thing. I'm not sure, but with a closed adoption, your biological relatives can't have any contact with you unless your adoptive parents give permission. And my adoptive parents had always told me that they wanted me to wait until I was 18, because again, my mom was always she always had like this, just the sense of fear that as soon as I met my biological family, I would just abandon her and my dad, and they would never see me again. And I would just disappear into this other family. And I mean, that's not how it works at all, but that was a really major fear of hers. So she made me promise to wait until I was 18. I did try to kind of broach the subject with her very carefully when I found all those phone numbers that supposedly belonged to my biological father, and she didn't seem to think it was a good idea for me to follow up on any of that. So I didn't, although I was still really curious, and I went away to college when I turned 18 in 2004, and I was actually taking an anthropology class my spring semester of that year, and we were learning how to actually like properly chart a family tree in that class. And of course that brought up all kinds of adoptee feelings, where thinking about family relationships and how the family tree that I actually know, that I actually grew up with, never really felt like mine. Having to revisit all of that in a college class, kind of all those the trauma of the family tree projects that I that I went through in elementary school, that all kind of resurfaced again in college. That got me really thinking again about trying to actually search for real and try to find my biological parents and my siblings. So I was actually planning this huge speech in my head. It was the week before spring break, and I was going to be spending spring break at home. And I was planning that week, when I was home for spring break, I was just going to talk to my parents. I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to jump in and just say, look, I'm 18. It was right before my 19th birthday. So I was like, I know you, you made me promise to wait. And I did. And I feel like it's really time for me to start searching. I felt like it was this burning, deep in my soul. It's I need to search. I need to meet these people. I need to just connect and be part of this family that's always been out there. And these siblings that have always shared a piece of my heart as I was growing up. And so I wrote everything down. I planned everything out. I was getting myself all psyched up, and I had no idea that during that very same week, two of my older sisters had actually found my parents' phone number and called the house and actually talked to my mom for about 2 or 3 hours each. So they had, my sister Lisa had actually searched when she was 16 and found our older siblings. And so she had been in reunion with them for about 2 or 3 years. I think it was about 3 years at that point. And they had all kind of made a pact that if we hadn't started searching for them if they hadn't heard from us by the time, the younger siblings, there's me, and then I have 2 younger sisters after me that I didn't actually know about until I met my older siblings. We knew about the 4 older ones. I'm number 5 out of 7. We knew about the 4 older ones, and my parents had actually told my biological mother that if she ever found herself in a spot where she needed help again, they would gladly take any other children. If she needed homes for other babies, they said we would very happily take any others if you need any other help. And they never heard from her again. So they just assumed that I was the last one, and that was that. So I got 2 surprise younger sisters after I met my older siblings. So that was a fun twist. So while I'm having this kind of very strong urge of I need to search, I need to do this, the time is right. During that same week, as I was writing out this speech to my parents, my sister Lisa and my sister Becca, there's another Rebekah in our family, which makes things fun. They found my parents' phone number and were talked to my mom for a couple of hours, and she took a bunch of detailed notes that she typed out for me and had an envelope waiting for me on the kitchen table for when I came home for spring break. And she got pictures off of, I think it was Lisa's MySpace, where she had a bunch of photos, and I think Becca emailed her some photos, and then Lisa gave her instructions on how to find photos on MySpace and stuff. So she my mom had printed all these photos off the internet of some of my older siblings, and she had this whole this dossier basically on everybody's ages and their likes and dislikes and personality traits and things like that, just waiting for me in this whole neat little package. So they came and picked me up from college about a week later, and we were at dinner. I went to school about it was almost 2 hours away from where I grew up, so like close enough that I could still come home for a weekend, but far enough away that it was like a little bit of there was a little bit of distance. So we stopped for dinner on our way back home. And it was a TGI Fridays, and we were sitting like out on their patio area, and I was like, we were just talking about just random stuff, like how classes were going, whatever. And we had ordered dessert, and our server was bringing the check, and my mom got really, really quiet all of a sudden, because like she wanted to wait until we got home, like to give me the envelope and tell me what happened, but she couldn't contain it anymore. So like the server's coming over with the check and like our dessert and stuff like that, and my mom just gets like just real quiet, and she's just looking at me, and she gets all teary-eyed, and she tells me that she had some really big news for me. Like I kind of look. I was trying to figure out like what's going on, what's happening. Like, what did some like foreign prince propose his hand in marriage to me or something? Like, I don't know. Like the way she was acting was just so I had no idea what was coming. And she told me that two of my sisters had contacted her, and she had talked to them, and they wanted to meet me. And after that, I couldn't string two words together coherently. I had such a mix of, it was just this overwhelming, this was like, I still can't really put into words the actual emotion that I felt in that moment. Just like everything kind of stopped. I wasn't in a restaurant anymore. Time didn't even exist. This moment I had waited for, like these words that I had waited to hear for my entire life, that my siblings wanted to meet me. I still can't even put it into words. That's basically what I sounded like when I responded to my mom. And I think for like another like hour or two after that, the only thing I could say was, "Oh my God," for just like an hour straight. And this poor server is standing there just like holding our check out, like waiting for someone to give her a Visa card. She's like, so I get home, we get home, and I walk into the kitchen, and my mom gives me the envelope and all of that, and I'm reading all of these notes that she just so painstakingly put together about these people that I had dreamed about for my entire life, for 19 years. I had been imagining these people in my mind, and they were one step closer to being actual like flesh and blood family. It was just such a bizarre feeling. And she had everybody's phone numbers listed on there too, so that I could get in touch with them. And I had to call Becca first though, because Becca was the first one to reach out and call my parents. So she insisted that I be the first one. That she be the first one that I call when I reached out. So fair is fair. So so I called her first, and we talked for about an hour, and then I talked to Lisa after that, and then Mary, and then our brother Jacob. Just like even just hearing their voices on the phone, and like hearing how Lisa laughed with the same laugh that I had, and like seeing their like their young adult faces in the photographs that my mom printed off, and just like all the similarities. Like I felt like I was seeing like my face on like other people's heads. Like it was such a bizarre, like something I hadn't experienced before. Yeah, looking at people who actually shared my features. Like it's so freaky because we all have like the same exact eyes. I remember the very first time that we met in person, it was at our biological mother's house. It was a couple months later that year. We got together over Memorial Day weekend. Jacob had, I think he was in Had he just graduated? He was in the Army, and I think he may have just been finishing training. I don't totally remember though. But anyway, he came back to New Jersey for the Memorial Day holiday, and then he was going to be heading back down to Virginia, I think, to finish the semester or something. So he was back for a couple of days, and he wanted to meet me. And then Mary and Lisa heard that he was planning to meet me in person for the first time. They're like, "Well, we have to be there too." So they got plane tickets, and Lisa was in Florida at the time, and Mary was in Chicago. And so they flew in from their respective areas. It's so crazy too, because we all actually grew up. With the exception of Mary and Becca. They were out in Oklahoma with our biological grandparents, but all of the rest of us grew up within about an hour or less of each other in southern New Jersey. And then by the time we actually met, I was going to school about 45 minutes outside of Philly. Jay was finishing, I think, his military training down in Virginia. Lisa was in Florida. Mary was in Chicago. Becca was in Oklahoma. And Meg and Leslie, our two youngest sisters, didn't even know anything about us yet. And they were still in South Jersey. But the rest of us were all scattered, like, to all four corners of the U.S. map, pretty much. So that made things kind of challenging over the next couple of years, as we had several other reunions. We met Megan for the first time. I think it was 2 or 3 years after my first reunion with everybody, and then we met Leslie for the first time, I think, another 2 years after that. So it was this series of reunions, and we were getting increasingly spread apart physically when we had all kind of started out in the same kind of nuclear area when we didn't know each other, and then when we were finding each other, we were all like far flung all across the continent. So that was that made for some interesting dynamics, and it took us 10 years to actually get all 7 of us in the same place at the same time, which happened back in 2015 when Mary's book got published. So it's a process, which is kind of our tagline. Hashtag it's a process.
That's an amazing story. I really want to hear, how are your relationships going now with your siblings? Now you're, 12 years out from the first kind of meeting them?
Yeah, it's man, it's another complicated question to try to answer.
How are your 6 relationships with your siblings, plus your parents? And yeah.
So I went from basically from having no siblings at all, people that I only just kind of dreamed about, to having first I had 4 siblings, and then I gained 2 younger siblings a couple of years after that. Yeah, it's been a lot. It's been a really interesting journey going from, so it's like these people that I built up in my head from photographs, to these people that I met for the first time when I was 19, and just like see like that transition from like people who I imagined to these people actually being flesh and blood, who like shared my DNA and had like my facial features and things like that. Like going from the people that I imagined to the people that they actually are was an interesting journey of discovery for me. I think one thing that's been, I think, kind of the most complicated in our relationships is the fact that we have between the 7 of us, we have I think like 5 different sets of parents. Like we have, it's not just like like when you like of siblings who grew up together. Like you share your childhood, and then you kind of go your own ways for college, and then you get married, and you have your married family, and kind of like you settle in different areas, and you kind of drift apart because you have these different family relationships to manage in adulthood that weren't there when you were kids, and there's different obligations, and that kind of changes the flavor of your sibling relationship. And it feels like we never really got that real bonding experience, because we've always had other family obligations. Like, we've always had that other family out there, that other sibling groups don't really have, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. It just makes everything so much more complicated.
Yeah, like, we also had this pull of, our adoptive families who expected that family time with us, because like it's this sense of trying to balance kind of like, I don't know, almost like primary and secondary family. Mm-hmm. But like, they don't feel like a secondary family to me, but that's kind of how it ends up working in reality, even though I don't think any of us really want it to work that way. But I think by necessity, it's the sense of like, you have the family you're obligated to. And again, like, an obligation feels like such a wrong word too, but it's like the family who kind of like expects you to spend time with them versus the family that you want to spend time with. I kind of felt like I was two different people for a couple of years earlier on in my reunion. I was the person who I got to be when I was around my siblings, and then I would come back home after a reunion to just like my bedroom with my twin bed, and it was just me and my parents and my cat, and it was a very different vibe. It was so quiet, and there was an emptiness that I just didn't like, and it didn't settle well with me. And I felt like I was a lot more me when I was with my siblings. And then when I went back home, I had to be I had to be the person that my parents knew me as, even though I felt very different when I was with my siblings. So it was this kind of like balancing act that I was doing for a couple of years. And I think that kind of affected how my relationship with my siblings grew, because I was trying to kind of be like one person with them who like I really wanted them to like me, is kind of I had this underlying fear that maybe me just being me wouldn't be enough for them. I still have that fear sometimes. I mean, it's been 12 years. I think one thing that really helped was actually finally being able to get all 7 of us in the same place, in a place where we didn't have any other obligations at all. It was a random week in the summer. It was like the middle of June. So there were no holidays going on. There were no other family members. We decided to make it just strictly siblings. So no spouses, no significant others, no distractions, because all of the times that we've gotten together in the past, it's either been around Christmas or a wedding, some big event where there are a lot of different family dynamics happening at once. So we decided to completely take that out of the equation and have it just be the 7 of us, no distractions, and we bonded on a level that just felt very, very natural. We fell into these very natural patterns, and I think that was the first time really that I didn't have that fear. I didn't have that sense of like I need to be the person who I want my siblings to like. I was very afraid. We all came from very different family backgrounds. I was raised very conservatively, and I was homeschooled from middle school through high school. None of my other siblings were homeschooled, and I think their parents were like kind of like varying levels of religious, but they weren't as conservative as my parents were. My parents are like the most conservative of the bunch. So I didn't have a lot of the life experiences that my siblings had growing up. You know, I didn't have the typical high school experience. We also had some mental illness in my adoptive family. My dad was bipolar and OCD. He had kind of a major breakdown when I was in high school, and that really isolated us. We lost a lot of friends and were isolated from family members as well during that time. That had a real impact on me during my formative years. I didn't have a very normal childhood in my adoptive family, especially during some of those crucial years when it really matters, when you're really trying to form your identity. I never really felt like I never really felt like I knew who I was. I felt like there was always kind of like a gap in my personality. There was always some part of me that was missing somehow. And I still felt that after my reunion. Reunion didn't fix that. And I think reunion highlighted that more in some ways for me, because I was trying to be cool, because I wanted them to like me. I wanted to kind of like overcome this sense of like, oh, Rebekah's the conservative homeschooled girl, you know, and the rest of us aren't. Mm-hmm. I wanted to like feel like I fit in, and I didn't always feel like I fit in, and I don't always feel like I fit in. And I think I expected that from reunion. I definitely connect with my siblings in a different way than I do to anyone in my adoptive family, whether that's like my parents or cousins or grandparents or any of that. I feel like the relationship that I have with my siblings is very, very instinctual. It feels very instinctual, very natural, very intuitive. Like we just kind of get each other on a level, even though we didn't grow up together. We had very different childhood experiences, very different formative experiences in very different families. There's still this kind of like visceral level that we really connect on. It's like we can just pick up from wherever, even if we haven't talked in months. And with my parents, I feel like the relationship I have with them is something that we've really kind of like worked for and fought for and forged, kind of tooth and nail over the past like 31 years. It's been a work in progress for my entire life with my adoptive family, but it's very instinctual and natural with my biological family. So there's a different quality, even though there's been insecurity. There's a very kind of natural instinctual level that I kind of feel like we always just kind of get each other no matter what.
Can you talk a little bit about what does it feel like to know that you were one of the first ones that was relinquished to a completely different family, like strangers, and then was it your two youngest sisters? Like, were they adopted to the same family? Am I getting that right?
They were.
Yeah.
Yeah, they grew up together.
Yeah. Can you just talk a little bit about your feelings about that?
I was really jealous, honestly, when I found that out, because I didn't know anything about them or anything about how they grew up or So Lisa was an only child, and she has a similar beginning to my story, where her parents told our biological mother the same thing, that if you need a place for any other kids, we'll gladly take them, and they never heard from her again. So they just figured there weren't any more out there. So I was a surprise for Lisa when she met our older siblings at 16. And then Megan and Leslie were a surprise for me. I felt jealous, and I felt kind of a sense of betrayal a little bit, just at the thought that like I could have, like my my parents made the offer. It's not like they didn't want any more kids. Like they wanted more kids, and they would have taken more. They would have taken both of my little sisters, and just the sense that I didn't have to be lonely. I didn't have to be an only child. It just, someone else made a decision that's how it was going to be for me. So there was a sense of powerlessness. I felt kind of betrayed that my birth mother would have made that decision. I don't know entirely what her reasoning was. I do know that our biological father he kind of had this sense that they couldn't afford the family that they were having. So because they weren't able to afford to raise a family, he felt that it was a good thing to give us to couples who weren't able to have kids. So he kind of felt that it was like a personal mission almost to kind of like bless other people with all these kids that he was having and couldn't afford, which, I mean, on the surface maybe sounds altruistic, but when you unpack it for more than half a second, it's a little twisted. He was trying to kind of drive that decision, and then she at one point decided that that's not how it's going to be, and we're going to keep the last two together. So I mean, I don't know what made her decide to place Leslie in the same family that she placed Megan in. I don't know what made her not kind of take that stand earlier. We haven't really talked about that, but yeah, it was something that I had to work through. For sure. It took me a couple of years, honestly, to kind of come to a point of forgiveness. I don't blame her for anything. I feel like she was kind of my biological mother. I feel like she was, in a lot of ways, a victim of her circumstances and the people around her. She didn't have any support from her husband, from his family. She was really kind of trapped in these decisions that other people were trying to make for her. And the counsel that people were giving her was to kind of follow what her husband was saying and do this nice thing for these other couples who can't have babies. It's great. So that's what people were telling her to do. That's what people were kind of cheering her on for. And, like when you're surrounded by that, I mean, like, what other options do you really have? So that's kind of how I view it now. But in the moment when I first found out that I had two younger sisters who got to grow up together, I did feel very jealous and had some forgiveness work that I had to do there. I had a really good counselor at the time, which really helped. I recommend therapy for anyone going through reunion.
Yes. I definitely agree with that. So you guys had a pretty public story. It's a unique one. There's 7 siblings. Your sister Mary wrote a memoir about your story from her perspective, but she kind of shares bits and pieces of all of your stories. Can you talk a little bit about people's reactions to that, to you personally, and some of the things that they might have said that maybe they shouldn't have? I'm sure you've had lots of well-meaning people tell you some things that maybe shouldn't come out of anybody's mouth.
Yeah. yeah, for sure. One of the things that people always like to ask me, I think one of the first things that comes out of people's mouths when I start telling my story, like, oh yeah, I mean, I was adopted, I'm an only child, but I also have 7 siblings, or 6 siblings, rather. There's 7 of us, 6 siblings. I'm good at math. I was adopted. I'm an only child, but I also have 6 siblings, and they were adopted by other families. And one of the first things that people always tend to ask is, well, why didn't they use birth control? And I never really know how to field that one, just because I was like, well, if they used birth control, then I probably wouldn't be here. Like, I don't know, like, which one of my siblings shouldn't be here? Like, which one should they have used a condom for? Like, it's almost kind of wishing part of my family out of existence. And like, I'm not gonna say that I haven't wondered that myself sometimes, but like, it's such an invasive question to ask someone about their family. It's like, well, I don't know, why didn't your parents use birth control? why are you here even? I mean, what kind of question is that even?
Wow. Okay. Well, that's one I haven't gotten yet. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's more because of the nature of our story.
Right.
I mean, they kept having kids and giving them away. So why didn't they just use a condom? It's like, well, why do you have the number of siblings that you have? I mean, it's just it's something you don't really have the right to ask anybody, but somehow I feel like anytime adoption comes up, like, people just feel they have the right to give you opinions or ask you questions that they wouldn't ask other people, like in other family situations.
Oh, no kidding. I think I don't even know how many times people have been like, wow, you're adopted? That's awesome. I wish I was adopted. Like,
yeah.
Actually, no, you don't. But thank you. Thank you for that helpful.
It's actually a little complicated, but yeah.
Oh, that's awful. Okay. Anything else?
There's the whole real family thing too. I get that a lot. In fact, one of my very first encounters with like, which one is your real family, or who are your real parents? I was like 3rd grade, and I had my one of my best friends from grade school over. She was visiting my house for the very first time, and we were playing Barbies, and I was telling her about my adoption story, and she my mom was in the kitchen. We were in the living room, and she looked over at my mom, and she said, "Oh, so that's not your real mom then?" And I kind of looked at her, and I was like, "Well, yeah, that she is my real mom. She's standing right there. She's not a fake person." Like, what does that mean? Like, yeah, she's my mom, and my friend just kept insisting, like, well, yeah, but she's not your real mom. Like, what happened to your real mom? And that was the first time that this concept of real came up for me. I was like 8 years old, and this sense of like someone in my life who was part of my family, like, has no legitimacy. It's either, and it's this either or situation. It's either my adoptive family isn't but it was before I met my siblings. It was always, well, when are you going to meet your real family? When are you going to meet your real parents? Don't you want to look for them? Don't you want to find your real family? And then after I met my biological family, it shifted to, oh, well, how do your real parents feel about that? How do your real parents feel about your reunion? Or which one do you consider to be your real family? It's like, well, it's not either or. It's not this sense of, like, only one family has validity. Like, they're all my family members. We don't ask people with step parents, like, who, like, I have friends whose parents have gotten divorced and remarried, and I don't think I've ever heard them talk about, getting asked, who, which one is your real mom? Is your stepmom your real mom, or what? When you get married, like, no one asks if your parents are jealous that you have in-laws now, nobody. But when you meet your biological family, that's one of the one of the top questions I get is about like how did your parents react to this? But it's not about them. It's about me and this crazy blended family that I have. Like one of my favorite recent memories was at my own wedding. I had my family there, my husband's family, 5 of my siblings that were able to make it, my biological mother, her husband, and my biological grandfather was there as well as my adoptive grandmother. And we were able to get this photo with all 3 of my families in it. Well, I guess 4 if you count my husband, because he's my family too. But so all 4 of my families in this one single photo, and that moment felt kind of almost bigger than my wedding itself. The fact that I was able to get all of these family members who represent all these different facets of my family relationships in my life. They're all in a single photo, and that's what reunion is like. It's different facets of the same family. It's not, you don't have to pick and choose. And I wish people could understand that more. They understand it when it comes to in-laws or step families. I never get why people have such a hard time with that concept when it comes to adoption too.
Rebekah, I think that is a perfect place to kind of stop. I love that picture of your 4 families at your wedding. So my recommended resource, I told you before we started recording, I'm kind of embarrassed that I haven't even talked about this on the show yet, because it's anything that Betty Jean Lifton has written. And we've mentioned Nancy Verrier a number of times in The Primal Wound. But Betty Jean Lifton was also one of the first people to really write about adoption, adoptee rights, adoption reform. She was a great advocate for our community. And I have this quote that I keep coming back to that she wrote. It's, "Reunion is an ongoing dialogue between the past and the present." And she has all these little gems in the book I'm reading right now is Journey of the Adopted Self, A Quest for Wholeness. She's got a number of others. And I'm just, I have a copy of her obituary printed out. It's from the New York Times. She passed away in 2010. She was 84. The end of the obituary talks about the dedication in one of her books, that she dedicated the book to her 2 mothers, who she wrote, quote, "might have known and even liked each other in another life and another adoption system." Yeah, so I'd recommend just picking up one of her books, or if you Google her name, she's got a lot of different articles available. I think Davis from season 1, I think he was one that first sent me one of her articles that talked about the ghost kingdom, which we often talk about if you're an adoptee in the fog or out of the fog. And I think that might be where that term comes from, the ghost kingdom, about where people are in your life. And anyway, I don't want to explain it because I'm sure I'm going to get it wrong. But yeah, just go look for one of her books at the library, or just Google her name and find a couple of the articles she's written. Lots of really valuable thoughts and things to think about. They're dated, of course. I think this book is from the 90s. So there's some things that are out of date, but I've been
But the 90s were only 10 years ago. So.
That's right. And fashion, I mean, we're in it again, right? So it's all
exactly.
It's all the same. Do you have any choker necklaces?
I don't actually. I don't.
I can't bring myself to buy them.
I gave my last one away in college.
I'm sure. Me too. I'm just a couple years older than you, but I am still in my 30s too. Okay, so Betty is my recommendation. What did you bring for us, Rebekah?
I think the one that I will go with, so kind of, I don't know, something that's always kind of struck me, I guess, is like kind of like the limited limited language that we have to try to describe family relationships and like what the experience of being adopted really is like. I'm personally a really big fan of the Donaldson Adoption Institute. They publish really in-depth research to help reform practices and public perception of adoption in the U.S. They have a really, really great blog that gives really unbiased perspectives from adoptees especially, but also all members of the triad. And they just have some really valuable insights and really valuable data too about what the experience of being adopted really is like, and how it differs from I think kind of the popular cultural narrative. They do really good work that I'm a real big fan of, especially when I try to tell other people about my story, and trying to challenge some of the cultural narratives and cultural perceptions that are out there.
Yeah, and April Dinwiddie is one of their directors, and she's got a great podcast that I love to recommend. I've recommended it before, I think. Born in June, Raised in April. Yes. They also, did you see the study that the Donaldson Adoption Institute put out about relinquishing mothers? And it was just a couple months ago, I think, about the reasons for relinquishment. And yeah, it was really amazing to read. So sad, but really good.
They released one back in November as well about options counseling, and how I think it was one of the statistics that they uncovered was that about 80% of relinquishing mothers would have chosen to parent their child if they had been given more comprehensive information about support services that would have been available to them. And that was a really so like we kind of talk, or at least in the adoption circles that I run in, we talk a lot about how biological mothers are very misperceived. It's kind of like, oh, they're doing this really selfless thing because they want to, or they're saving a child from abortion. How great. Or or like all birth mothers are terrible drug addicts who should never be parents in the first place. And this the study they released in November just really shows that no, actually, that's not the case. These are actually responsible women who are trying to make the best choice with the information they have. And if they were given better information, they would have kept their kid and been a parent. Like it shows that, I don't know, we still have a long way to go, I think.
Yeah, definitely. That's exactly the one I was talking about. And I agree that it was a lot of stereotype busting, because I was talking about their levels of education, and for some it was a financial hardship, but for others it wasn't the case. So yeah, I would recommend going and checking that one out specifically as a starting point. Okay, what else would you like to recommend?
Yeah, so you mentioned Betty Jean Lifton's Adoptee Activism, and I'm a little bit of an adoptee activist myself. I recently got involved as a volunteer organizer with the Adoptee Rights Campaign. They are doing really incredible work. They've been hard at work since 2015, at least, to try to pass the Adoptee Citizenship Act to grant automatic citizenship to all adoptees. And this was something that I found out about for the first time in 2015 during National Adoption Awareness Month. It was actually through the Flip the Script hashtag. I think one of their organizers used that hashtag to mention something about their campaign, and that was my first exposure to what they're doing. And I was completely blown away to find out that there are currently about 35,000 adults who were legally adopted as children, just like me. The only difference is that they came from other countries. People who were adopted before 2001 and who were over the age of 18 in 2001 were not protected by the Child Citizenship Act, which sought to kind of correct a legal loophole where children brought from overseas for adoption were not given citizenship. So there's a whole other process that adoptive parents had to go through to get citizenship for their newly adopted children, and just that something as basic as citizenship isn't a right that's given to adoptees. It's something that is so completely unconscionable to me. And when the Child Citizenship Act passed in 2001, that still didn't protect all adoptees. There are still currently children coming into the U.S. through legal adoption channels that our government cannot guarantee citizenship to, and they are deportable for even just minor things like if you registered to vote because you thought you were a citizen, like the parents who were raising you, who adopted you, and you find out you're not a citizen, but you voted in an election, you can get deported for something as basic as that, even though you're, by all accounts, an American who has grown up in an American family with American parents. It's just absolutely unbelievable to me. So I joined up with the Adoptee Rights Campaign earlier this year as part of a nationwide push that they're doing to recruit advocates in every state to finally try to pass the Adoptee Citizenship Act this year. There's been a lot of contention because it involves some immigration issues that people can get touchy about, especially in this political climate. So we're really hoping that we can kind of capitalize on some of the momentum that's been building up with the surge of activism that's been kind of rising up since the November election to try to get more people on board to lobby their senators and congresspeople to finally get this basic human right passed.
Well, I'd love it if you would send me a link to that so I can put it in our show notes so people can sign up to volunteer with that as well. Thank you. That is an incredibly important... I'm Canadian. I'm just flabbergasted that what do you mean you're not including people that grew up there? I don't understand that, but
right?
Yeah, it's crazy.
I know. And it depends on, it depends on the visa that the child is brought in from. So different countries use different visas for their adoptions. And the Child Citizenship Act that passed in 2000 to help, it was supposed to help streamline the process. So if a child is adopted on one certain type of visa, then they automatically get citizenship when their adoption is finalized. There are, I think, about 5 other visas that children can come into the U.S. on, and none of those visas come with automatic citizenship. Parents have to go through a completely separate process after the adoption is finalized. So it's not the law that was supposed to standardize citizenship for adoptees still doesn't standardize citizenship for adoptees. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, that's kind of a problem.
So there are still children who are vulnerable who could get deported. Mm-hmm. It's ridiculous. And because things aren't standardized, it means that parents get misinformed sometimes. There's a parent who has a son who's actually impacted, who had a lawyer. The lawyer who handled his son's adoption straight up told him, now that the adoption is finalized, there's nothing else you have to do, when in fact that wasn't true. So lawyers are giving their clients incorrect information because the law isn't standardized, and adoption agencies are sometimes giving out misinformation. So it's been a problem for a very long time, and it's a problem that we very much need to fix, especially now.
Thank you. Thank you for telling us about that. I follow you on Twitter, and you have been tweeting up a storm lately. A little bit about this, and a little bit about just educating people on adoption issues. So what's your Twitter handle? Where can people follow you?
I am at Beck Henson. That is BEK, and then Henson, HENSON.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I just really appreciated your honesty and candor with us.
Yeah, it was lovely. Thank you so much.
If you want to hear another side of Rebekah's story, go back and check out Season 1, Episode 7 to hear Mariana's perspective. These are some amazing, passionate sisters. I'm kind of in awe of them. Links to that episode and everything we chatted about today are on adopteeson.com. This podcast is brought to you by my Patreon partners. Patreon is a site that allows creators like me to raise monthly support to help me keep producing amazing content like this podcast for you. As a special thank you for a monthly pledge, I have a secret Facebook group for adoptees where we support each other through search and reunion issues, and we get really real about things we are struggling with. Come and join us. Adopteeson.com/partner has all the details. I wonder if I could ask a favor. Would you share the show with a friend? Maybe it's a fellow adoptee who's been asked the same inappropriate questions we've been asked. When you meet them next for coffee, ask for their phone and show them how to download the show. Thank you for listening. Let's talk again next Friday. Hey, you made it past the outro. I want to say thank you by letting you in early for a contest I'm launching to celebrate my podcast's 1-year anniversary in July. If you leave me a rating and review in iTunes, you will be entered to win an autographed copy of a book by my dear friend Anne Heffron. Her memoir, You Don't Look Adopted, is the best adoptee memoir I've ever read, and you will love it, I promise. She will personally mail you a copy if you live in the U.S., and if you're outside of the U.S., I will send you an e-copy, which won't be autographed, obviously, but I bet I could convince Anne to write you an email or something to go along with your ebook. So that's a rating and review in iTunes, and hopefully you leave me 5 stars. But just as much as a 1 or 2 sentence review of why someone should listen to the show can really help me grow my audience. And I'll read some of my favorite reviews on the podcast. I will choose 5 winners. So write your review and then go to adopteeson.com/contest. Send me a note telling me what you wrote and your mailing address. And I'll be announcing this on next week's episode, but I wanted to give you a head start. So if you do your review this week, I'm going to pick one winner before next week's podcast even goes live. So that is a special thank you for listening to all of my extra words. Have a great week.